Hello and welcome back to AP Psychology. I'm Miss Lee and we are still in Unit 7. This video will focus on the motivation of sex. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe classic research findings in specific motivations, in particular the motivation system regarding sex. Okay, so let's first talk about the psychology of sex. Hunger responds to a need. If we don't eat, we die. Sex in that sense is not a need because if we don't have sex, we don't die. The individual does not die. Our sexual motivation is going to have biological factors, psychological factors, and social cultural factors. Biologically, this is going to include sexual maturity, sex hormones, especially testosterone, and our sexual orientation. Psychologically, we're talking about exposure to stimulating conditions and sexual fantasies, and social cultural factors will include family and society values, religious and personal values, and cultural expectations. So let's talk about the history of the scientific study of sex. The first major study of sex was in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Alfred Kinsey interviewed over 17,000 everyday people concerning their sexual behavior. What he did was he rated their behavior on a 0 to 6 scale. 0 was exclusively heterosexual, 6 was exclusively homosexual. He found some very interesting things, and because he interviewed so many people, you can be assured that the sample size was quite large. What he found was that people tend to fall on a spectrum. Of course, as you might expect, this is still controversial today. The next wave of research regarding sexual response was conducted by Masters and Johnson, and this was beginning in the late 1950s all the way through the 90s. And what they did was very revolutionary. They actually brought sex to the laboratory and from research described human sexual response as consisting of 4 phases. So the first phase that they were able to determine was the excitement phase. And basically they explained this as the genitals become engorged with blood. The vagina expands and secretes lubricant, and the penis enlarges. The next phase is the plateau phase. Excitement peaks, and you can see this in the changes in the body, such as breathing, pulse, and blood pressure. Then the next phase is orgasm. Orgasms will lead to contractions all over the body, and this increases breathing, pulse, and blood pressure. Basically, it's known as a sexual release. And then the last phase is resolution. This is where the engorged genitals release the blood. Males go through this period of refractory phase. You might remember that word from when we were talking about how neurons have a refractory period. After they have fired, there is a period of time, very brief, that they cannot fire again. Women do tend to resolve slower. Sexual orientation refers to a person's preference for emotional and sexual relationships with individuals of the same sex, other sex, or either sex. This is separate from one's sexual identity, how you kind of see yourself. So the 3 basic categories include homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual. Most psychologists today view sexual orientation as neither willfully chosen nor willfully changed. This view is a drastic change from a time when homosexuality was seen as a mental disorder as recently as just a few DSM editions back, and the view remains a controversial one due to societal, political, and moral factors. Most of the scientific theories point to a biological or genetic cause of sexual orientation. We do have some evidence there. When you look at the brain, there are some anatomical differences. The size of the anterior hypothalamus is smaller and the anterior commissure is larger in homosexual men. And here you see a graphic that demonstrates those differences. Several sources suggest that homosexuality may be due to genetic reasons. First, we know that homosexuality tends to run in families. When we're looking at twin studies, homosexuality is more common in identical twins than fraternal twins. However, there are mixed results here. And an interesting research study with fruit flies shows that genetic engineers can genetically manipulate females to act like males during courtship and that males can act like females. We've also seen that there's an influence prenatally. Hormones that are released during critical periods of fetal development can affect sexual orientation. This usually happens somewhere between 2 and 5 months after conception. In animals, we've seen that testosterone exposure to the fetus results in female sheep showing homosexual behavior. In humans, we've seen female hormone exposure to male or female fetuses resulting in attraction to males. So very interesting research. There is surely more to come. And that's it for the motivation of sex. In our next video, we'll be covering the motivation of work and achievement. I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.